Hello everybody, this is Brian from Breaking Down Security. Part 2 of our interview with Jarrod Frates is up, and you're going to hear some really great information about being a pen tester, how to become a pen tester, how to be a better pen tester, and what value to bring when you're doing a pen test. It's not all just fancy running SQL map or Nmap and dropping a report on everything company's done wrong. You're going to hear some really great information here. You're also going to find out some of Jarrod's favorite movies. So we're going to drop you right in here with a question I asked about going from automated to manual testing. Have a great week. When you do a pen test, you'd use a combination of automated tests and manual tests, I assume, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. So my problem is I'm getting into pen testing. I've got my vulnerable VMs. I'm sitting here. I'm running Nmap on them. I'm finding all the ports and everything. My problem is when it comes to actually attempting to exploit these things. I see that SSH is running, maybe an old version of SSH. At what point do you stop doing the manual testing and you go, okay, I'm just going to have to jump in with both feet and make this happen? How do you make that transition between doing the automated testing and going into manual testing?
It's something that takes a little practice, and I know exactly what you're talking about, the kind of looking at the output that you've got and going, I have no idea what to do. It's like if I took somebody and just dropped them, like somebody who grew up in Bismarck and drop them in the middle of Los Angeles and said, okay, so go find a library.
Exactly. Thank you. Yes. You understand.
No idea whatsoever where to go, and you're probably just going to get hit by a car trying to cross the street.
Yep.
So the way that I've learned to do it is I have a certain set of steps that I prep. So I have my scope and I know what networks I'm doing, and based on the size, I'll probably split it up into multiple Nmap operations, for example. And I kind of queue all that up before the test even starts, before I'm on site or before the VPN starts, usually the week prior. And I'll kind of get those kicked off at the beginning and just let them run and watch and see what the output is for a little while. Mm-hmm. Usually by the time I've gotten to the point where everything has been kicked off, some of them are starting to return some information that I can start working on. But going back to the very first test that I was on, I was terrified. I knew the basics of how all this stuff was supposed to work, but actually putting it together in a useful sequence, I had no idea what to do. And the guy who had hired me, he says, all right, well, let's see what you've got. And so I showed him, and he said, all right, well, let's start with this. And he pointed to a finding within Nessus that there were a couple of systems that were vulnerable to MSO 8067.
Oh.
And he said, all right, so let's load up Metasploit. And he said, go ahead and configure it for that, and we'll fire it off, and that should work. And we did that, and I'm looking at it, it's like, hey, I got my first interpreter shell, and it's on a real target, on a real box, and now suddenly some of this doubt is kind of starting to slide away. And as I finished going through the rest of the test over the course of I think it was 2 weeks, I got to the end of it, and I've been able to compromise a number of systems, and I kind of made the points on with the customer, and got a chance to write everything up, and afterwards I was kind of like, okay, there were definitely some places that I could have done a lot better. That first test is always going to be a little bit rough, mm-hmm. but at the same time, I was able to make some jumps and was able to find a few things. There were some little esoteric aspects of the network that I was able to find some ways around, or find some ways to exploit. And getting that first test out is really the important thing. Once you've done that, then your confidence level goes from how am I ever going to do this properly to how do I start improving things? Mm-hmm. Coming out of it and looking at it and going, okay, so the first 2 days, were definitely, there was a lot of wasted time there as I was kind of getting myself situated. But now, like I said, the week before, I'm prepping the scans, what needs to get fired off. Maybe I have some information about the system. It might be something where I've tested that network before, so I can look at the previous test and see what might be there. As far as when to move from the automated to the manual, it's a back and forth process. If you if you take a class, you'll often learn some variant of the attack cycle, where you start with reconnaissance, you go to scanning, you do exploitation, you do post-exploitation. The reality of it is you're going to do recon, and then you do some scanning, and you might find that there's something that you didn't see in the original recon that comes out of the scanning that you can do some more recon on.
Mm-hmm.
So you might do a step back. But let's say you move on to exploitation. So now you're on a box, and your scope allows you to use that as a jumping point. Well, now you have to move back to scoping, or not to scoping, but to scanning, or even back to reconnaissance, just looking around that box and seeing what kind of information you can pull off of it.
Sure.
That might be helpful in figuring out how you're going to structure your scans. And then, now you go into the scanning, and maybe while that scanning is running, you're now doing post-exploitation while you're doing the scanning. And with some of the tools, you might even see exploitation happening by the automated tool, getting you a point. Like, for example, if you're using Core Impact, you can actually do scanning, exploitation, and post-exploitation at the same time.
Wow. Okay. So is that that's not a free tool. What other tools you use? You said Core Impact. You mentioned Metasploit, Nmap. What other
Nessus.
tools? You use Nessus quite a bit?
Nessus is, Nmap and Nessus are the primary scanning tools. We do use some other things kind of on a case-by-case basis. We also make some pretty heavy use of Burp Suite when we're going up against web targets.
Okay.
There are a lot of tools out there. Some of them work better for some testers than others. Everybody has their own particular way of doing it. I know that there are some testers who rely heavily on Metasploit Pro, and these are some very good testers. I'm not knocking them, but I don't use Metasploit Pro. It's got some real nice to haves, but you have to weigh that against the cost of that versus the cost going into other tools. The same thing is out there with Core Impact. It's a commercial tool. If you get the benefit out of it, great. If you work heavily with Python, Core Impact is built around Python. So it becomes very easily scripted with that. Similarly, there's Canvas. There's a bunch of web scanners out there, and some of them have links into other languages. It all depends on what actually works for you and what mixes in with your particular routine.
Jarrod, how do you bring value to the customer with your pen tests? I mean, I know you try to. I mean, what are some of the key indicators of success for you?
The number one thing, well, I'll tell you, the best thing that I've ever had happen to me was presenting. This was after the report had been turned in, and I was asked to do a final executive overview presentation to a number of people. There were managers and so forth, and I think there was even a VP in the room. And this particular client had actually gotten a pretty clean bill of health the year before. But when we went in this time, we found that there was something, and I hadn't done the previous test, so I don't know if it was something that was overlooked or if it was something that was new. But when I went in with fake credentials as just a regular external customer, not even like one of their internal users, I found that I was able to actually get in and ultimately gain significant access on their internal network from the perspective of an outside user connecting from some random place on the internet. And to kind of verify that, I not only connected from from within the U.S., but I used Tor and connected through a relay that it turned out to be coming from Krasnoyarsk, Russia. Oh. So entire opposite side of the world, and in a country that is sort of not well known for being gentle to certain companies. And when I presented this, there was about 30 seconds of silence on the other side of the line. And I was kind of nervous and thinking, okay, so I guess I'm done here. And I was just about to say, okay, I guess that means there's no more questions. And the other side of the phone just erupted. And they weren't yelling or criticizing me or anything. They were talking to each other and figuring out what could be done this week, what could be done this month, what was going to take 2 years to re-architect. Mm. And that just, Ed Scotus at DerbyCon was talking about, the pen test of a lifetime. And I don't think I've gotten to that point yet, but I think I found the road marker pointing in that direction with that particular test. Mm-hmm. Ultimately, when I'm doing a pen test, the result, the final product is not that I got domain admin. It's not that I found credit card information. It's not that I found the secret merger details. It's that I've delivered a report that everybody in the business, from the CEO, if necessary, all the way down to the techs that are implementing changes, can make use of. And that sometimes requires that I make some decisions about where to go with things. I've got clients.
So you're thinking about that before you even start, or when you find something, how can this lead me to my ultimate goal of the ultimate pen test, right?
Yes.
Is that what you're saying?
I mean, I'm not necessarily thinking of like how do I turn this into the ultimate pen test, but it just, there's all these things that build up that ultimately will result in a good product. If I hand over a report that only the people who are writing the code can use, and like the network people can't make sense of it, and even worse, the people in management look at it and just go, I have no idea what's going on here, that report is not worth as much.
Sure.
If I can explain to the CEO, these are the practices that need to be changed. I'm not going to go in and say, well, you need to go in and install the patch for MSO 067 so that I can't get on and do a interpreter shell and dump the hashes, and that's not going to work, because he's probably not going to have a good idea of what any of that means. But if I go in and I say, so we were able to compromise the systems and gain access to the passwords that were stored in an encrypted fashion. I know technically it's hashed, but encrypted means a little bit more to them. And I was able to crack 43% of them in 2 hours.
Yeah.
Because your password policy says that you have to do an 8-character and it has to have letters and numbers.
Mm-hmm.
So then I'll go in and I'll say, your password policy should be 10 characters, alphanumeric symbol, because it would take this long on a modern system, or this long on a powerful cracking system, to break it. And it becomes then, you're now talking business terms to them.
Right.
How long is, if it's going to take 40 days to crack something, maybe that'll be enough for the business overhead for a 10-character password. But maybe they're going to look at it and go, no, that's not good enough. Okay, well, 11 characters is going to take, say, 60 times longer. So instead of a 40-day turnaround, you have a 240-day, you have a 2,400-day turnaround. It doesn't mean that some of the passwords aren't going to get cracked much faster, but on an average basis, you have it longer. So they have business decisions that they can work with. Some of the stuff does get semi-technical, where it's like, implement a patch monitoring system. And here's the value for that. They'll turn that decision over to the technical people to actually implement it. But if you put it in the business terms, it's something that they can make sense of. And ultimately, it even benefits the IT people, because they might be a little bit more likely to get the budget to implement these solutions. If I hand over a highly technical report that just, well, why should I spend money on this? It doesn't make any sense to me.
Yeah.
So, but at the same time, I also have to make decisions sometimes. Part of it is time based, but if I go in and a client, maybe they weren't really ready for a pen test. They may be. I go in and I find out that they've got, half their Windows systems haven't been patched in 7 years, and that becomes an enormous problem. They have more basic problems. I can get really fancy with things and say, okay, well, here I can come in and I can bust everything and I can create a golden ticket, and then I can, gain access to your SQL through to your databases through this SQL injection that uses this fancy code that's not going to do anything for them.
Yeah. So in some
Instead,
ways,
if I go in,
it's kind of harder if they're not doing their jobs and patching systems. It's kind of harder for you to provide value.
It is harder. It can be much harder, because I have to make a point. I have to make a decision about the point where I'm going to cut things off. And I've stopped in the middle and just said, okay, I could get fancy with this stuff, but you guys have more basic problems.
Yeah.
And so we're going to go through this, and I'm going to do a few more things, but we're going to be really focusing on these basic things that you need to fix first. We can come back and do a retest, or we can, come back next year and do a new test. And once things are cleaned up, but some of those things are really hard for me to see, just because coming from a sysadmin background and a defensive background, I want to reach in and fix them in the middle of the test, but but I can't. There's lines that the pen testers aren't allowed to cross.
Yeah. So you not only would bring just a regular report. The whole idea for you is to maybe change the culture to get the VPs to understand that your IT folks, obviously will need some tools or maybe some training or something, and to help them understand that, you've got an ugly baby and you need to fix it. You bring a cultural shift in some cases.
That's what I'd like to see. It doesn't happen all the time. Those situations where the table on the other side of the phone erupts in conversation are pretty rare. I do have some clients that they're trying. They really don't have a big IT staff.
Yeah.
Their entire IT staff may be 6 people, including server admins for 900 users. And that gets really rough. It's easier to administer those kind of numbers these days, but you do still have to have the products in place to be able to handle that kind of thing. Yeah. And I try to give them suggestions for things that they can go after that would make life a little bit easier. Some of them it's just like I'll spotlight things like just shut off or like implement egress filtering. You don't need all ports outbound opened up.
Sure.
It's a tough thing to nail down, but for a lot of these environments, they could probably do it in a couple of weeks. Just let everybody know, hey, we're implementing some new filters. Open up a help desk ticket if you run into a problem getting to some service you need, and then we'll get that port opened up for you. But for the most part, you don't need port 7 outbound for anything.
That's true.
You might need 2121 for an alternate FTP or something like that, but there's a lot of ports that you don't need and you'll never need.
Yeah. Do you spend a lot of time trying to get a business to not fear you to begin with? I mean, are you there? Do you have to have the old spiel like, I'm here to help, please don't lie to me about certain things or try to hide me, or try to actively hack me because you're not helping yourself in many cases?
I haven't had anybody try to actively hack me yet. I think at that point I'd stop the test and go and start having discussion about what's appropriate to do. Yes, I'm on their target environment. No, I'm not a legitimate target. Yeah. They can do whatever they want on their own stuff, but this is my system.
Yeah.
And they do not have permission to hack it.
Not hack, but I meant like if they're trying to actively block you, like, oh, he's scanning this box, we'll just go ahead and take it offline so it doesn't show up on a scan. Or do you ever have anything like that?
I had a situation where I suspect that was something like that was happening, but it wasn't something that I could really prove. Yeah. So I basically put some things in the report saying that some percentage of the environment was largely inaccessible, and we suspect that it was due to ACLs and or firewall rules. And they wanted me to say that this was a good thing, even though it meant that I couldn't get access to their databases and most of their websites and stuff like that. And I was kind of explaining to them that, okay, maybe, but I'm not going to put it in there that it's a good thing. I don't know if it's a good thing or a bad thing, so I can't make that call. But what I can say is I couldn't reach this percentage. And I do go into places that they don't want me there. They feel that in some cases that I'm an extra expense that's being put on them by somebody else.
True.
That I'm just there to make them look bad. And it becomes a very difficult thing to explain to them sometimes. No, I'm not here to make you look bad. The reality is, if I come back in a year or 6 months or next quarter or whatever, I would like for my report to say, this is what the situation was last time, and these are the improvements that I've seen. Last time, I was able to get domain admin by the end of the week. This time, I was not able to get domain admin. Maybe I got some level of access, but I wasn't able to get domain Or, last time we got full access through a SQL injection, and now we've seen that proper filtering is in place, and this application is now much more secure. I love writing stuff like that. It can be a real challenge when I'm actually doing the test and kind of, beating my head against the desk, like, why doesn't this work? But if I get to the end of it, and ultimately the reason that it didn't work is because they have good defenses in place, I love writing that kind of stuff up. I love handing off, kudos to some group because they've implemented something that makes my life more difficult.
You ever get on a pen test and you've done something, you do a report, and then you're going on another engagement, and you're like, oh, I could have done that to that box and gotten X on the that other job. You probably have that a lot, I imagine?
I wouldn't say a lot, but it happens regularly enough that I it's a good thing that I have some extra stuff sitting over here on the side of my desk that I can pound my head into instead of putting a dent in the desk itself. Yeah. But every once in a while, I run into that where I'll get to the end of a test and I'll be looking over the notes and go, oh, I missed that. And I could have done this and gotten this access. And in those cases, I do have to put it in the report saying that this was a possibility, but due to time constraints, it wasn't tried. But this is a potential risk and should be examined, and here are the solutions for it. Yeah. And I did that one time, and I came back on the next test and went to try it, and they'd fixed it. And I was like, I wanted to see how that would work. But you know what? They fixed it. Got to put that in the report. So said, Good job, you guys.
Yep. So you don't try to just run a bunch of automated tools and then give people their checkbox pen test. That's gotten kind of a negative connotation in recent years, where you've got the
RCPT.
Yeah, the RCPT. Yeah.
If you don't know what that is, go listen to the interview with Ed Scotus.
Oh yeah, that's right. We did a short interview with Ed Scotus. So, Mr. Betcher, you have any questions for Mr. Jarrod?
I did 5 seconds ago until let me think. Jarrod, I think it's really great that you have the business in mind that hired you. You like putting things in reports that say, hey, you did a good job on this. I wasn't able to do this. I would think a lot of pen testers have a tendency to play king of the hill and say, I got you. You suck.
Focus on the negative.
But I think I like your attitude in that you tend to put yourself in their place because you've been there for, I don't know how many years you said, quite a few years, 9 years in IT as a defender and administrator.
Well, yeah, it was just 9 years as a defender. I've got, and this actually kind of pains me to say it, but between the unofficial start of my IT career and the official part of it, I've got nearly 20 years in IT, and I actually still, even as a pen tester, I like to talk to end users. Mm-hmm. Usually it's not talking to client end users, but people that are still just doing regular day-to-day stuff, that the only reason that they ever have any interaction with IT is because their connection to their email isn't working or something like that. And I saw over the years too many people who got into server admin or network admin or security, and they would kind of forget about the end user because they didn't work with them on a regular basis. And the impact of the changes that they were making were often not taken into account. That they would go through and they say, well, we have to make this change because it would do X, Y, and Z, which is better for the business, without going through and considering what it's going to do to the end user. And I'll be honest, I did that on occasion, especially when I was doing firewall stuff. It'd be like, oh, well, this shouldn't be open. I'll close this. And then, 3 minutes later, I've got people calling from the help desk saying, okay, so the board just lit up.
Yeah.
What did you do? And I think that connection with the end user is very important, because ultimately the end users are the reason that we're actually able to do all this stuff. Without those end users being there, there's no reason for the large network. Without the large network, there's no reason for the pen test. That's
true. Yeah, they are the commodity. They are the people who need it, and we don't have a job without regular users. So
not unless you work for, what was it, Instagram, that only had 7 employees.
That's true. Yeah, when you can just yell down to the IT guy to fix it, and he's 5 seconds later, the fix is in.
I think in that case, everyone's the IT guy.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah.
Well, Mr. Betcher, if you don't have any other questions, I wanted to ask Jarrod if he's going to be talking anywhere, or if he's got any kind of papers he's got out, or anything we could, link to on our show notes for people to, look at and gain knowledge from him.
Well, I have a website, llamasinmynetwork.com, that I occasionally update, and which I'm actually hoping to be putting a few more updates, basically some notes that I've put together for doing pen testing. But I'm also the CTO for a soon-to-be nonprofit. We're waiting for the final IRS paperwork to come in, called the Plano Hacker Makerspace. That's located at the lab.ms. And the site's a little ugly right now. We're actually, just in case anybody in the lab community happens to be listening, we'll be at our next monthly meeting, we'll be unveiling the plans for a new website that'll be a little more integrated.
And that's in Dallas, the Dallas-Fort Worth area?
It's in the Dallas area, the North Dallas area.
Okay.
And let's see, what else? I need to confirm this, but I believe at the end of October I will also be talking before NASIG Dallas on how to get a good pen test. And that's going to be kind of for those who need the pen test, not for those doing the pen test, although some of the tips will also be for those actually performing pen tests. And I have 2 SANS mentor courses in the Dallas area that are coming up. I have a SANS Sec 504 course that is coming up in January, and I have that's for the incident handling.
Yep.
And I have the Sec 560 pen test course that is coming up in April.
Very nice.
So
you're a busy little beaver, aren't you?
Yes, it's getting very busy for me. Yeah, and I actually have quite a bit of work that's going to be coming up, plus family possibly coming in for the holidays. So that's going to be an interesting balance. Not to mention, still finishing up the house and getting the network runs finished.
All right, Jarrod. Wow. Great to have you on, man.
Yeah,
thanks.
It was awesome.
This was a lot of fun.
Yeah, we'll have, if you ever want to come back on and talk about anything, we love to have you on. We say that for all of our guests, but we're not Hollywooding you. We actually really mean it. And if you have any, how can we find you on Twitter or the Face Spaces?
On Twitter, it's at Jarrod Frates. I don't have a fancy name for it. And unfortunately, Network Llama, which is my handle in a few other places, like on Freenode, unfortunately somebody already took that a couple of years prior to me coming up with the name. So, and they haven't tweeted anything in like 4 years or something. So,
squatters, we hate them.
Yes, exactly. So, and ethically, I can't go and hack them and take it back.
Yeah. Okay.
Although you'd like to.
Yep.
All right,
so you can find Betcher, Mr. Betcher, at BetcherPwned, PWNED. I'm at Brian Brake. I'm not fancy either. We have a Facebook fan page, facebook.com/Breaking Down Security. That's my last name, Breaking. Somebody asked me the other day, did you misspell it? And I was like, no. It's kind of a play on words there.
I thought it was clever when I saw it, actually.
I know, right? And it's like that Simpsons episode with the B Sharps, the barbershop quartet. It's funny the first time you say it, and then it's just not as funny every other time you say it. So.
By the way, I have to hate you for the next 5 minutes for saying "I know, right."
I know, right?
Yeah, that's like that old British thing of like adding "what" on the end of every sentence.
Or
like the posh thing. No, the "yeah" thing I can kind of go with that. My parents had friends that would do stuff like that.
Oh yeah.
But the old British thing of putting a "what" question mark on the end of things.
Jolly good day, what?
Yeah, I mean my favorite movie, Mary Poppins.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not generally a musical person, but Mary Poppins and the original Willy Wonka, those are really right up there. That and Grosse Pointe Blank, those are like my top 3 movies.
Oh, wow.
So, but there's a part where the Admiral adds "what" onto the end of it, and it actually kind of drops me out of the movie every time.
Great.
Yeah, it's just like, ugh, don't do that.
Yeah. So we're on the Twitters and on the Facebooks, and you can look us up on LinkedIn if you want to. What
about the G+ and the LO?
I'm on Google+, but it's like LO. I don't have an LO invite, and I don't know if that's a
I'm still
flash
waiting for mine.
or not. So, yeah, I don't know about LO. So, but you know, if on Google Plus, it's plus Brian Brake, I guess, if you want to get on there too. I'm boring on there too. I just mostly post security stuff. So, well, that was it for this week for Breaking Down Security. And, we've got a lot of good videos up there. Marcus Carey, we did a 2-parter with him last month. We got a video up for PGP and GPG, which worked out really well. Shows you how to set up your public-private key pairs, how to sign emails. I found out that, GPGing your email doesn't necessarily encrypt the metadata. So, you can, still get your metadata followed if you're not encrypting that. So yeah, have a listen to those, and come back next week. We'll have some more awesome stuff to talk about, and everyone have a great week.